I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, January 16th meeting of the Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Kitzlar.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Kuhr.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here.
Alders Spate and Holmquist are excused.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 2nd meeting?
Move to approve.
Second. Any comments, questions, additions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item D, appearances. We have two appearances that I know of, unless anyone else would like to make an appearance, in which case you should fill out a form over there. First is Teresa Rademacher, who would like to speak about the All-City Swim Meet. And if you could state your name and address, Teresa, when you come to the podium.
So my name is Teresa Rademacher. My address is 5201 McKenna Road. I've lived in Monona for about 12 years, and I love this community. So I'm not sure if this is the body that I should be speaking in front of, but it seemed like a good idea. I'm here to talk about a pretty big event that's coming to Monona Thursday, Friday, Saturday, July 26th, 7th, and 8th. It's not exactly the Olympics, but it's pretty big for this region. It's the All-City Swim Meet. 13 swim and dive teams from around the region. 3,000 swimmers competing, and an additional 10,000 spectators, officials, staff, crew, whoever you need to pull off an event like that. A lot of eyes are going to be on Monona. And because I love my city, I would really love for our city to think of ways that we can really shine and show everyone how awesome we are. We can expect to get about a full week's media attention, newspaper, TV, you name it. We're also going to get national coverage from like the ESPN type media. The organizers of last year's event said that there had been about 40,000 views of last year's swim meet from around the country. 80% of those views were from outside Wisconsin. The city of Monona needs to charge a fee because the club is using our stuff. And I'm not here to talk about that fee. I think whoever came up with that number can be trusted. And I'm also somewhat aware of the financial challenges the city is facing. What I am here to talk about is how I would like to ask you how we can work together, the club and the city, to make this event as gentle on our city in an environmental sense as possible. How can we create the lowest waste, lowest footprint event? And I've been helping the club to do that. Last year, the club really made a huge effort toward reducing their carbon footprint. We held the very, very first zero waste event in all league history ever. And we're an athletic club, so we're passionate about health, the health of ourselves, our athletes, our community. Here are two ideas I have that this community, this body could help the swim team. I saw in the paper that we have a really awesome electric vehicle. And I know that below the caption it said it was something that city departments could use. I don't need an answer tonight, but if there's a way that the vehicle could be at the event, showcased. Look at Monona, we have an electric vehicle. We could use that vehicle to transport people from really far away parking spaces, maybe people who need some assistance. We also are going to use golf carts, but that electric vehicle sure would be nice. Second thing that I could think of is that the organizers from the event last year told us that they purchased anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 bottles of water that they sold at the event. That was for hospitality alone, and then for concessions they bought another 3,000 bottles of water. I know that you can bring in these water wagons where people bring their own water jug and you fill it up. You see them at marathons and races. The city of Madison has a water wagon that they use. I've contacted the city of Madison, and I know that because there's the Madison Water Utility and the Monona Water Utility, I know that there might be a conflict and we may not be able to use their water wagon. I'm fine with that. But if I could find some other service, a rental of a water wagon, would this community consider an in-kind sponsorship as a way to promote? You don't need to drink water out of a bottle. Why? Because the water that comes out of the tap in Monona is some of the cleanest water on the planet. I think that's probably a true statement. Promote the goodness of our own tap water. We don't need bottled water. So I don't have all the details on what that would look like right now. I know that there are places that do have these fill up your bottled water stations. Maybe the city would even provide bottles that say drink local water, like they do in Madison, drink Monona tap water, something like that. Anyway, that's kind of my rough. So two things: the electric vehicle and sponsorship of refill water stations.
Well, thank
That's
you.
it.
And I should mention Teresa is a very active member of our sustainability committee also, so.
She is.
All right, great.
Thank you, good
Thank
ideas.
you.
We will
Thank
take them into consideration. Okay, next appearance is an engineer's update on the Winnequa Park PCB study. I think Dan is going to introduce Luke Kellerman, who will address that.
Luke has been working with the city since late 2015 on this PCB study. I've asked Luke to appear before the Public Works Committee last week to give an update, and he's here again tonight to talk to City Council to give an update. The PCBs that we found is in the Winnequa Park Channel, just north of Nichols Road. And Luke will get into the sample data that he has and some of the other grant work that Strand has done for us. So, Luke, if you want to come up and...
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me here tonight. Like Dan said, I'll talk about Winnequa Park, lagoons, and the sampling that we've completed so far, and kind of the direction that we're heading. Hopefully you all have some of these maps in your handouts. It'd be beneficial if we can just go through the maps. The first one that I'm going to talk off.
Could we use the overhead? You know,
Andy's our tech support.
what happened to them?
I don't remember seeing any.
Yeah, they'll bring it up there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't appear to have the overheads. I'm not sure what happened there, but.
Yeah, this should have all been in the packet.
Oh, no.
It is on. Okay.
I got them from Dan.
You have them?
I have them.
Oh, where were they?
Well, no, I mean, I've got them from the Public Works meeting.
Oh, okay.
You have to look at each chair.
Yeah.
There you go.
Looks like, there you go.
it's a little hard to see.
Andy, can we make that bigger, or?
Can we zoom in a little bit?
It's just this thing right here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So back in 2015, we started sediment sampling. Sediment samples were collected, shown in the green, on the green locations there, SB1 through SB6. So from the south of Nichols Road, extending onto the north side of Nichols Road, and we collected those samples. That was related to some dredging and culvert replacement that was done at Nichols Road. And elevated PCBs and pH contamination was detected at that time. And then the DNR requested further investigation. So then in 2016, we did some sediment samples from 9 additional locations north. All of these were north of Nichols Road, from locations N7 through N15, which are the orange locations shown there on the map. And we had elevated levels of PCBs again and PAHs in some of the sediment samples. We also collected 2 sediment samples much farther to the south that they're not even shown on this location. They're off the map, but we did two samples farther to the south, and they did not have any contamination. Then in 2017, sediment samples were collected at 3 additional locations farther to the north. That would be the blue locations there, and 16, 17, and 18. So the contaminants we have here, PCBs, bichlorinated biphenyls. People are probably familiar with that. It's in electrical equipment, in oils. Oils used in motors and hydraulic systems, and PAHs, which are basically generated during the incomplete combustion of organic material. Could be wood, could be oil, gas, lots of different things. So PAHs are pretty common in the environment. So on this figure, we have some data shown here in the table. Again, it's going to be kind of hard to see, but the data table summarizes the pH and PCB concentrations detected in both the sediment samples and then also in the parent material. So you have your loose sediment that accumulates in the pond, and then beneath that you have your parent material, which is kind of your native soils. And the concentrations here on this figure are compared to the DNR's sediment quality guidelines. And they have the TEC, which is the toxicity to benthic dwelling organisms is unlikely, so that'd be kind of a low level. And then you have your midpoint effect concentration and your probable effect concentration. The probable effect concentration would be where benthic dwelling organisms are probably impacted. So that'd be any of your insects or worms or anything that are down in the sediments. So on this map, we've got some areas outlined here. The areas outlined in blue show where PCBs exceed the TEC, which would be where toxicity to benthic dwelling organisms is unlikely. And then the areas in yellow would be where pHs exceed that level and toxicity may be likely. And then there's one small area of sediment at SB4 that has the PCB concentrations exceeding the PEC, where toxicity is probable. So the red area there is where the highest concentrations of contaminants are located. Okay, got another figure here. All right, so this is the same sampling locations. And it just shows another set of standards that the DNR has. So on this figure, there's a table at the bottom that's not shown right now, but it compares the PCB concentrations and PAH concentrations to NR 720 soil standards. I can't really, maybe if I zoom out a little bit. So the table here just shows that there's really widespread exceedances of PAHs and PCBs exceeding the non-industrial site standards. So that'd be more of for a residential site. That'd be all the concentrations in this table that are in a box, which is pretty much all the locations except 3, SB2, SB3, and N18. And then we've also compared the results to the industrial site standards, which are shaded in this table. And only SB4, SB5, SB6, and SB8, 4 locations exceed the industrial limit. And that's what's, again, shown here in the map, outlined in red as the highest concentration in the sediments. So that's the area that we're concerned with. This is the area that the DNR is requiring removal of the contaminated sediments. If there's any questions while I'm going through this, please just let me know. I'll try to answer those. So this map is the same lagoon. It just shows a plan and profile, plan view, and then a profile view. And the blue line cutting across the middle there separates phase 1 from phase 2. So you can see Nichols Road on the left-hand side. And then the area that's highlighted in yellow, that would be the same area that I showed on the previous map in red. That would be the sediment with the highest concentrations of contaminants. So like I said, the DNR is requesting removal of that sediment from that area. That would need to be disposed of in a landfill. To dredge that area would be about 600 cubic yards of material. And we're referring to that as phase 1 dredging. So the dredging to the left of the blue line is phase 1. The cost for dredging and disposal of that material in a landfill would be about $400,000. And then if we did some additional dredging, phase 2 dredging to the right side of the blue line, to just dredge out the rest of this lagoon, and then also extend farther up keep going all the way up north into this channel. You know, that dredging is being considered. It's not required by the DNR, but it would improve stormwater detention capacity, would improve stormwater quality, drainage through that area. And then there would be other potential improvements with that. some of which are shown on here. You know, the stream bank restoration, a canoe launch, some improvements to the riprap. So that'd be referred to, like I said, as phase 2. So the phase 1 and the phase 2 dredging together, that would be a total of 2,800 cubic yards of sediment removal. And the cost for that would be quite a bit higher, assuming it all went to the landfill. That would be $1.1 million to remove all that material and take it to the landfill.
So that's 1.1 for both phase 1 and phase 2?
Yes.
It's not just for, okay.
Correct.
And just logistically, probably a dumb question, how do you physically just dredge half of a pond
Well, there's
without
different,
filling it back, I guess?
there's different methods. And one way to do it would be to lower the water level, dam it somehow and just drain it out, and then you could go in there with more typical excavation equipment and excavate it. So you could then have a contractor go, you know, pretty precisely right around the yellow area and just remove that material. Or you, with water in there, you could use the hydraulic dredging and just kind of suck the water and the sediment out at the same time, and then run it through some bags and filter the water out. So those are the two methods that are typically done.
And then sorry, last question, and then I'll be quiet. I'd imagine there's cost savings to doing 1 and 2 together. What is, if we literally did phase 2 in a phase 2, how much would that be separate?
Phase 2 alone?
Yeah.
Well, it should be a pretty, you know, we had 600 cubic yards for phase 1, 2,800 total, so phase 2 would be 2,200 cubic yards. It should be pretty straight math because everything is assuming that it's all gonna go to the landfill.
Okay. I didn't know if there was savings with just bringing the equipment in once and doing it all then.
Well, yeah, I guess as far as mobilization and doing the whole thing at once, there would be some savings, but I don't have those numbers offhand.
No problem, thanks.
I have a couple of questions. So to go back to kind of as a follow-up of Andy's comment, what is the flow of the water? So it just speaks to the whole issue of only doing half of it as well. Is there a, I'm seeing topo lines, but I'm not seeing what is the actual flow?
So it flows from the north to the south, from the top of the screen towards Nichols Road and then out in that direction.
So you would essentially be, the flow would be the cleaner, what is currently a cleaner part of the lagoon to then what we're cleaning out. That's the dirtier part, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, as far as, you know, what the source of this contamination is,
Yeah.
and you know, there was some waste disposed of in this area. There was some historic landfilling operation where these lagoons are. Based on the testing that we did, we don't have any reason to believe it's related to the waste that was put there because the contamination is just limited to the sediment, and then the samples we collected from the lower parent material were all clean. So to us, it looks like contamination at some point was probably released to the stormwater and just flowed into the pond and settled out in the sediment in this area here.
Because that was going to be my next question, given that, at least for some of us, PCBs raised some pretty significant alarm bells. I was wondering if you knew what the source of it was. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of speculation, but that's just my feeling. Because we did think about that and we did collect the parent material samples and we thought, well, you know, if the parent material is contaminated too, then maybe it's leaching from the landfill waste into the lagoon, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
I have a question. The two brown lines, I think one of them says 12-inch and 24-inch, or those are stormwater
Yeah,
pipes, is that right?
those are stormwater lines coming into the lagoon.
Would that be a likely source of the contaminants?
Could be. Yeah, could be. I mean, it's hard to say. It could have come in through one of those storm lines. It could have come in from the channel to the north. I don't know.
Is there a date that we have to have this dredged by?
Well, we submitted a report in the fall of 2017 to the DNR. Reported all these results. We haven't gotten any response from the DNR, and we probably won't get any response unless we request a technical review, which requires paying them a fee. So at this point, the plan is to, they have, just through conversations, indicated that the area I outlined and I talked about tonight is the area that they would like to see removed. So the next step would be to remove that material, collect some confirmation samples to prove that it's all removed, and then submit a closure request to the DNR and request that the site be closed. So then it would no longer be on their list of active sites. So then as far as whether or not, like I was talking about, whether or not we did the phase 2 dredging or not, that would be up to the city.
I'm just wondering, in terms of the phase 1, is there any kind of rule that, say you submitted it last October, it has to be cleaned up by October 2019, or I'm just
No.
thinking about our capital budget.
Yeah, no, we don't really have any hard deadlines that
Okay.
they've expressed to us. I think it's every 6 months I get something in the email, through the email from the DNR that just asks for a status update. So I just fill that out quickly and say what we're doing, what the status is, and we can submit that. That goes into their system. I think if it was something that sat idle for a while, then typically the first step is that they would send a letter and just
Mhm.
ask what's going on. But right now, we don't have any deadlines.
And if it were to sit, and I'm not saying we should never do this, but if it was to wait like a year or something, is it causing more damage to anything, or is it kind of just sitting there where it is encapsulated, sort of, or I just trying to get a better handle on it.
Yeah, I can't really say. I don't know how long it's been there. I don't know when it came into the area, into the sediment. If there was a big storm event, is there potential that the sediment would be moved south of Nichols Road? Perhaps. That's something that we could certainly talk to the DNR about, the timing, and maybe propose a schedule to them, and just to make sure that they're on the same page with what the city wants to do.
I'm just curious at this point, so.
Do we have anything budgeted in the capital budget this year at all for this?
No.
I can't remember. No. So were we planning on, is this something we can approach the DNR and in terms of grant money to support this? Since they want.
Well, we have, over the last couple of years, we've gotten a lake management planning grant. I think we've gotten 2 grants, we've applied for a third. So in the coming year, 2018, we're going to do the final design on the dredging. Right now, we're assuming that we're going to prepare the final design for dredging all of the lagoon north of Nichols Road. And then we were talking about whether the dredging would occur in 2019 or 2020. That's kind of where we're at right now. Is trying
So
to
I'm sorry, I
plan.
guess we do have something in the budget for the planning, but not for actually
It's
doing
not
the
the actual
dredging,
budget.
right?
It's in the 19 budget for the second, the dredging. is in the
Okay,
19
but the the
proposed.
design is in this year's
Yes.
budget, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I guess I'm also wondering if, not to, I know we're hesitant to raise the price tag even more, but if we're unclear as to whether the storm lines that are going into the lagoon are causing or contributing to the contamination, it seems to me that you know, we ought to be looking at the stormwater issue too, and whether or not it makes sense. It's not like those buildings or surfaces that are, you know, that are essentially our city center are gonna be going away. If anything, they might be expanding. And so if those storm lines are actually, you know, it seems to me if we might wanna consider the types of filtering that we have used in other areas, as we're planning for it, no? I mean, or just raise that as a possibility as we're looking at a master plan, if you will. I mean, if we could rule it out, it wasn't the stormwater pipes, then, and it was a storm event from the north, it would be one thing. But if we have no idea and our, like I said, our hard surfaces in this area, if anything, are gonna be increasing, given the city plans, it just seems like it's a bit risky to just leave them be.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that'd be something we'd have to discuss.
If I might, the PCB contamination, it was really more common in oils and electrical equipment and transformer oil years ago. So now, it's just not something that's used, it doesn't, you know, it's not in the oils anymore.
Okay.
So it'd be my opinion that this release happened quite a few years ago, sometime in the past. You know, it could have been a spill somewhere in Monona that got into the stormwater and came into the lagoon through the pipes, through the stormwater pipes. It could be that it was sitting in the sediment for a long time, because PCBs, once it's in the soil, it's pretty immobile. It's not going to move unless a storm event comes through and really flushes that sediment out. So it's really hard to say
Okay.
when this release happened. But I guess I was not thinking that it was an ongoing release of material.
Okay.
Andy?
Has this ever been dredged before?
To my knowledge.
Okay.
When it was created.
Yeah.
But, okay, yeah. Okay.
Was that 1955 or
Something like
something,
that,
or
yeah.
60 or?
Yeah, you know, we probably might not have ever known it was there if it wasn't for the work that was done at Nichols Road and the sediment sampling we did, because we knew we were gonna generate some sediment and we needed to figure out what to do with that sediment, so we did the tests, and then it was detected at that time.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Just
Doug?
more of a, I guess, a comment, or, I know when we did the dredging at Belle Isle and we dewatered it in bags just to the west on the, and sort of where that, where the playground equipment is in that area. But there was, the discharge pipe went into that part of the lagoon, and it was a fairly high capacity. When they used it, there was a lot of water flowing out of it pretty quickly. That, not suggesting that's where the PCBs came from, but just that, for what it's worth, you know, that would have seemed to have generated a pretty decent flow of water through there. That if something, you know, that might have, if it was going to move, that might have caused it to move.
Mhm.
Do you recall that, Dan?
Yeah, there was obviously drainage from the banks, but I know the sediment sampling that we got back from Belle Isle didn't have anything
Right.
contaminated in it, but,
Right.
so what you're saying is if it was gonna move, that would have been the time that it moved.
Yeah.
That was probably around the 2012 timeframe, and I don't think you detected it south of Nichols Road, so
Mhm.
pretty much staying right where it's at.
Anything else? And did you have anything else for us?
I don't.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've all been wondering what's
Yeah.
happening there, so we appreciate your coming in. There is no public hearing. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve
Is
the
there another
consent agenda?
appearance?
Pardon?
Is there anyone else who wanted to appear?
Oh, did anyone else want to make an appearance? I haven't received any other.
Okay, all right.
sheets. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Item G1, unfinished business. A, consideration of resolution 18-1-2229, purchase approval of one current model year 3/4 ton pickup truck with plow put forth by the Public Works Committee. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Second.
Dan?
Okay, Mayor, the only thing to add from the first reading was that the Public Works Committee did review this request at the January 3rd meeting and did recommend approval of the purchase.
Does anyone have any further questions about this? Okay, Joan, does this require
What's the dollar amount?
It's below budget.
31,990.
Yeah, generally over 25,000.
okay, so
We can do a roll
will
call.
the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzmiller,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Coor,
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Find where I am here. Next item, new business. A, convene in closed session under Wisconsin statute section 19.85, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This is regarding the Yahara Riverfront development. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Move to go into closed session. Sorry.
Okay, I'll second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Coor,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzler.
Aye.
Okay, we're in closed session. About how long do you think?
Yep, went to sleep.
Sorry, you're.
All right, we are back in session.
And also, there's another whole issue just besides the hearing.
Okay, that looks like we are on air. So, we'll move on to item 2C, consideration of resolution 18-1-2234, amending the 2018 operating budget for a full-time administrative assistant position in the Parks and Recreation Department, put forth by the Parks and Recreation Director. Oh, and I have some, I think I handed you each a sheet. Looks like this, I left it on your place, that has a couple of, two different options for a salary for this position.
All right. Well, thanks for having me tonight. We had an unexpected retirement in our department, in our administrative assistant. So just a little bit of background. Last year, we have two permanent part-time administrative assistants, which are both like a .48 full-time equivalent. So almost 40 hours a week of coverage comes out to like 38. We had one resign in April of 2017, and that position was approved in the operating budget to be converted over to our after-school coordinator / rec coordinator. So that one of our permanent part-time administrative assistants got elevated to full-time status with administrative assistant's duties as part of that job. In late December, we were notified that there was going to be a retirement at the end of January of our other part-time administrative assistant. So as we started looking at it, this is the fourth person in this role in 4 years. And so we're having a hard time retaining people for a longer period, given that it's a non-benefited position. It averages 22 to 23 hours per week. We ask full days, so we've tried half days every day, full days, 2 days a week. The long-term goal was always to request a full-time position once this last person retired at budget, if it coincided with budget time. Given the improvements that we've made at existing facilities and our special events and our programs, the challenges, complexities, just sheer volume of work has increased over time as well. So we looked at what our options could be if this was something that Administrator Little and Mayor O'Connor were at least interested in hearing, that the council would consider during an active budget season. If it was something that the council at least would listen to consider, it's tough to say, okay, we're going to hire a temporary person until the end of the operating, or until the next budget season, or refill that with a permanent part-time position, knowing that, hey, your job may be eliminated as it goes full-time next year, and thank you for your time that we just trained you for 3 to 6 months, and now we're looking at someone with a different skill set. At a full-time position, we're going to be asking for a little bit, maybe more background in marketing, communications, computer skills, etc. Move the position to a full-time status, or do nothing, and keep it as permanent part-time. So that's kind of where we're at. The challenge when we do changeovers in our department is the amount of time it takes to retrain. Typically, it's a 3 to 6 month process to go through all of our policies, our specialized software system that we use for registrations, reservations, social media, website, email communication, getting to know kind of how our community center runs, building schedules, working with internal and external customers. It's a fairly daunting process that takes a lot of time with our recreation aquatic supervisor, spending with this person. And that's time that could be spent doing a plethora of other things that would be more efficient within our department. So I think this is an ongoing challenge at a permanent part-time status, and that's why we're here. We did not put this through Parks Board because just the timing of everything. We already had our meeting before I could talk to Mary about it. And we kind of need a decision one way or the other, because we're looking at right now this position starting April 1st. If it still remains at permanent part-time status, it's going to be roughly around the same time that by the time we market that position and get it filled, which is just the beginning of our very, very busy season. So we worked with Finance Director Mark Holtacher on a couple of what the budget implications would be taking it to full-time status with a family benefit package. So we always budget for kind of, if they would opt to the family, they could be someone with a single package and those numbers would be lower, but typically we budget based on family.
So Andrew?
And the two wage options, I don't know if you wanted to.
When Jake initially gave me the proposal, he had figured a wage of 18 per hour. The current person in the position is making $14.16 an hour, I think. So today, I asked Mark to also give us the numbers for a hire based at 16 per hour. So one side is 16, the other's 18.
Gotcha.
Okay. At Finance, we talked about this. One possibility we discussed was authorizing a range of 16 to 18, and if somebody was found with the skill set that Jake's talked about that would warrant and require, paying 18 an hour, that would be okay. But if somebody who didn't warrant that, then we should pay them possibly at 16. And then Mark, is he
He's
gone?
there.
Right there.
Oh, there he is. Used to looking down there in Finance. You're going to get the numbers or the details on when we get the TIF money in 2018. Yeah,
So currently, we're closing TIF 2, but because we're new Monona, it's open for one more year, which is this 2018. So when you close TIF, when you close the TIF, the levy limit lets you put so much value or more, increase your levy limits by a certain amount. I've done kind of crunched the numbers. It's gonna be roughly around 350,000 is what we'll be able to increase the levy. It's a one-time thing, just increase your base by that. And the issue I have right now is the timing of when we can close it, because technically we can't close until December. I think it's like 6th or 13th, one of those two dates. So I don't know if the state's gonna let us say that we're closing it, that they'll let us put it into the value as of 19, or if we have to wait to 20. That's what I gotta figure out. So I'm gonna work with Gary Becker and get that nailed down for the next meeting to figure that out, so.
so the reason that came, kind of left out a step in the reason that came up was concern about we're already gonna have to fund part of the firefighter position that we're not funding, we're only paying for 9 months this year, it'll be 12 in 19. And we're only paying for 6 months of the dispatch, and it'll be 12 the next year. If we add this, are we then really boxing ourselves in for 19? So we'd ask Mark to get that data for the next, before we have this, the second
Because we're
read.
just, we're not voting on this tonight. So.
Yeah.
Right. So, can I just ask, since this didn't come up to Park and Rec as well, I'm a little confused as to I guess the cause argument, which is to say, there's obviously a retention issue. Or I can't even say that. The reality of what happened is we've had 4 people in 4 years.
Yeah.
But I'm not hearing anything, but this last one anyway, you said retired. So that, to me, doesn't say anything about being part-time versus full-time. So why are we jumping to the problem here is that we don't have a full-time person as the reason?
We've essentially had a full-time position filled by 2 people, correct?
Correct. But in doing that is the big challenge of being able to find a fit that can keep the hours at a permanent part-time position that's not have benefits and make it a long-term type of proposition to stay in the department. So we've had several that have left for various reasons, 2 of the 4 for full-time employment.
Okay.
And I think to me, it doesn't really matter the reason they leave. 4 and 4 years is starting to be a trend that's not favorable for long-term sustainability in our department. If we're averaging 2 years per person or less, it doesn't matter what the reason is. It's well, I can tell you what, the main reason is that it's either pay, better opportunity, or that there's no benefits in any position that we're asking to perform semi-professional type of work.
Right. Well, I'm not now knowing that they went to full-time work, that tells me something. I'm just saying, if we're gonna go to full-time with benefits, I wanna make sure that's the fix.
Yeah.
If it's not the problem, it's not necessarily the fix. So that's what I just wanted to get clarity on.
Right. Yeah, that,
'Cause there's certainly.
in my opinion, yes, that
Okay.
is the big challenge, is that, the pay range at 16 to 18 is comparable, I think, to similar Park and Rec administrative assistants throughout the state. Dane County is a little bit tougher to compare ourselves to because there's higher wages here.
Mhm.
Still, with the benefit package that we offer as a city, it's a very attractive job for someone that wants to work with a great city and a great department and be part of what we do, which is, we do a lot of stuff. But in doing that, we also have a lot of, deadlines that need to be met. And, I want you to come up with 3 flyers today and update 16 web pages and,
Right.
answer 30 phone calls. So there's a fair amount of responsibility that comes with that position when, Jake is out in the parks or on a project, Missy's down at the pool, and, you got someone screaming at you about the park shelter not being clean or whatever it may be. So
Mhm.
I do think that from the colleagues that I have that have full-time administrative assistants, they tend to stay a long time that are full-time.
Mhm.
I could comment. Joan would like to make a comment.
Yeah, Joe.
I'm sorry, this is unusual for me, but 20 years ago, I was one of the part-time rec assistants. I would still be there if it had been a full-time job with benefits.
And Leah was one also.
And Leah,
Leah was
yes,
one also.
Leah was a part-time rec. And
So maybe it's just the director.
It's an,
That's-
well,
It very well
No, I'm
may
just
be.
joking. I'm just joking.
no,
Yeah.
but it's a wonderful place to work. I loved working there, would never have left. So you would have been stuck with me.
I would've loved
He's
it.
still stuck with you.
Not every day. But anyway, I'm just saying, this issue of that position has been an issue for decades.
Right. The flip side of that coin, of course, just playing devil's advocate is that you probably, I'm assuming that maybe you were, had young kids at home or whatever, and you probably weren't, when you started, you probably appreciated the fact that you could find such a cool part-time job. And you weren't
That's-
necessarily looking for full-time.
I was working two full-time jobs, two part-time
Okay.
jobs.
Okay.
Because the full-time, it just wasn't working.
Right.
You're right. Yes,
Yeah.
that is partial, but
Right.
then when it gets down to it, when you need a full-time job,
Yeah.
you need a full-time
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So.
I just wanted to ask the question,
Mm-hmm.
especially because we have a lot of young parents now in Monona, and our community is changing. Which means, of course, the parks are fuller than they were, and our programs are bigger, but just had to ask the question.
Andrew?
Is it usual for us? Do we have other positions that we offer a pay range? Because I feel like a lot of the times we're just told this is the salary, and then I mean, not going through the hiring process myself, I assume that's usually how positions are. But so is this unusual?
Well,
to do
I
if we
think
did?
what we would do is we try to budget for a high end and then advertise a range regardless that, we may hire up to that budgeted amount, but depending on qualifications and, applicants, we can put that as a range, or we could put a set scale. Having a range, even if the high end is your budget, gives you that flexibility, depending on who you get for applicants and qualifications. I think overall, as we look at hourly staff, the challenge for me is to say we start at 16, that's fine, but then that's 32 versus 38 annual salary. The time that it's going to take them at 1.5, 1 3/4, or 2% annual increases takes forever, to get up to that point. So if they're a great hire, a great fit, I would automatically want to get them up right away, at least just to say, you're going to get to that point, because we don't have a step system that says you start at one point and then based on performance, you're going to get escalated up to that next step, not a 2% increase type of year.
Mhm.
So in different cities do it different ways, and April can probably talk to
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we haven't hired a ton of people since I've been here, a few public works, but, sometimes the best candidate, is pretty green and pretty new to the profession, and other times we've hired people who've, been mid-career, so.
Okay, so
But
it's
it's a
standard.
narrow range, but
Okay.
yeah, we have made adjustments.
Andrew?
And you mentioned competitive in the Dane County region, so is that how you came up with the 38,000, or is the 33,000 or $16 an hour competitive as well?
I would say more at the 18. I mean, I was basing it upon what other admins were doing in Park and Rec, around the area and then throughout the state based on their, some of it was based on their longevity, and then everyone has different classifications of, their administrative one, well, we're, small, so we have it. I think it's at a point that we could attract some pretty qualified candidates, that it may even be a pay decrease for some if you're in a field where you're doing, let's say, graphic design or, marketing, and we have someone that's really strong that put together promotional materials, eventually, put together a newsletter, for example. Maybe we don't have to contract that out, that they can put that design together. Or they're completely able to update the web and do all the changes and like, quick. That's a big thing, is how quickly can you do all these things? We can all do it, but it might take me 2 days, it might take someone else 2 weeks, whatever it may be, with the benefits package that we have. Because I think most of us that have public sector experience don't realize maybe how good our benefit package is. So our health benefit package that we get as city employees is excellent compared to someone in the private sector potentially paying 3 times or 4 times per month what we receive. So hopefully that would be someone that has a passion for what we do in Park and Rec, and that's willing to, that has some of the experience or skill sets from a technical point of view, along with keeping up our customer service skills that we would have. Where, it's still not, I don't want to say it's not a lot, but 38,000 is not a lot for a full-time, position when you're looking at an overall spectrum of things in this county.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Nope.
All right,
We'll see you in a couple of weeks about this one. Now, you're still up for
my next two.
item
Go a little
2D,
faster.
consideration of resolution
let's try.
18-1-2232, approving participation in the Madison Area Sports Commission's Bucky on Parade event.
Ooh, yeah, this is a
Yes.
fun one.
Move to approve.
This is
Oh, sorry, never mind.
new business.
My
Yep.
bad.
Jake, you wanna?
Take it out.
I mean,
Does it not start?
no.
No. Do you
What
want it
is it
started?
first?
I mean, I
Maybe
would-
in-
Does
Sure.
it need
or-
to be started?
Yeah.
It doesn't
I
need
would-
to be started. He can break the motion to suspend.
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Do you want us to do it tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Someone, Andrew, you want?
move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Well, not
How about
tell
what
us
is it first, Jake?
Not that easy.
We're gonna have,
You're safe.
so you may have seen on news, Bucky statues are coming to Madison and Dane County. If you remember Cows on Parade a few years ago, the fiberglass cows that were done by local artists and auctioned off for charity. Madison Area Sports Commission, which is a branch of the Madison Area Visitors Bureau, has teamed up with Coach Greg Gard and his charity Guarding Against Cancer, and also other multiple charities, to do a fundraiser with life-size Bucky Badger statues that would be placed in different sections of the community. There would be sponsorship levels for businesses or citizens that they could buy a Bucky, have it commissioned, and then local artists will be designing them kind of based on where the locations are gonna be. And so Jamie Patrick is the executive director and also a Monona resident and has kids in our program, so we make all these wonderful connections through Park and Rec. And we talked about, he had asked me about the possibility, and I said, yeah, I think we'd be very interested in having some in Monona. So we met this summer with staff about possible locations, and they were looking for high visibility from a lot of areas, particular pedestrian and bike traffic, and so Schluter Park, popped off right away as kind of our first choice, or their first choice given the water and the bait and ice cream shop, and then Winnequa Park is kind of being the second possible location that would get as much attention from the events that we have. And so those two were selected. They have right now are still trying to secure sponsorship, so they actually have more locations than sponsors, at least as of last week. So I'd like to at least get this approved and try to get one in Monona secured with one of those sponsors, so we can at least see the Bucky. Bill would have to finish a facility use agreement, which is pretty standard, which would basically just be that we wouldn't be responsible as the city for any damages to the statue, and that they would list the city of Monona as additional insured and any other legal language that would not put us on the hook for any money or liability in case the things get stolen or damaged, which is pretty standard, which we could come up with, and they're fine with.
And they've already picked artists.
Was that?
They've already picked artists.
Correct.
Including several that are in Monona.
Oh,
That's cool.
Anybody have any questions, Jennifer?
How much is sponsorship?
I think it's like, there's 3 levels. 6,000 was the first level. That gets you, what did he, I'd have to look on the website, but I know it's like 15,000 got you the statue, like you could keep it, because I think City of Fitchburg bought one. So I was like,
Guess
is there
we're
any?
not the city of
Is there
Fitchburg.
any
Was that a
municipality-
dramatic pause you just left there?
Well, it's just thinking, hey, is there emotion? Then like 30,000, I think you get to design it or keep it, design it, and pick the location or something. So there's 3 different levels.
Well, that was gonna be my question, is if we were looking at potentially losing Bucky, you know, if we weren't able to secure a sponsorship, would the city be interested in sponsoring out of tourism dollars?
This could be our design piece at the riverfront.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking
Yeah.
for public art, but.
Public art for 50 grand, yeah. So we could always be gifted one of these too. There's that opportunity if someone sponsors it, and you know, if you have any connections with local Monona businesses, anyone that would want to persuade them to do that, and then
That'd be cool.
keep it permanently in the park, I think it'd be a pretty awesome idea.
I think this is awesome. I think their timeline for having it up, especially in those locations for all city, would be awesome too.
Yeah.
Publicity for us and them. It would be awesome publicity if somebody would paint it in Monona colors and Monona themes, and then
Yeah.
people would be taking pictures in front of it.
Yeah.
But
Can we put
Put
Bucky in
some
a Speedo or something?
yeah, there you go. Goggles.
Waves on the bottom and.
So anyways,
I
I'm
understand
supporting.
the former mayor is still in town, maybe we ought to see.
Yeah.
True.
Put it in the dog park.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, anything else? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And finally, one more for Jake. Item 2E, consideration of resolution 18-1-2233, approving a facility use agreement with Monona Swim and Dive Club for the 2018 All-City Swim Meet. Again, put forth by the Park and Rec Board.
All right, so this is a separate facility use agreement than we would have from their yearly rental of the outdoor pool for the operation of a private swim club. This is a 12-year rotating event that the Monona Swim and Dive Club competes in. It's a pretty big deal. It's going to be a large-scale special event in the city for over a week's time of when they're setting up and taking over the pool, community center, Winnequa Park. And so we drafted with the Swim and Dive Board a facility use agreement to cover those facilities and kind of set the expectations that would go with them. We identified lost revenue opportunities and expenses during the operating budget process and allocated $13,000 in our pool rental line item to cover those lost revenues from some of our from park shelter rentals, community center rentals, and daily admissions at the pool. And so we kind of went back and forth with the club on it. They're trying to raise a lot of money for this event. It takes a lot of money to put on a large scale event like this, and it's also a big fundraiser for the club, which typically most clubs kind of use as their base for improvements for other things over the course of that 12-year period of time. So they requested $10,000 in rental fee payment to the city. That was taken to the Park and Rec Board for recommendation at our last meeting. There was discussion about, you know, obviously this event's happening. It's a close relationship that the city and the Swim and Dive Club have had, and their recommendation was to accept the $10,000 rental fee, but $3,000 worth of sponsorship. So I believe the club is planning on having some advertisements on video screens during the swim meet, and they have different levels of sponsorship, so the city would be listed as a sponsor and get those benefits of a $3,000 sponsorship. I think it was their interpretation that this is a really great way to showcase our community and some of the things that we have to offer, whether it be WVMO, whether it be some of our special events through Park and Rec, our library, our sustainability efforts. So I think there is an opportunity to highlight what we do in the city through this event, and that's kind of where we're at. When we reviewed the numbers, the revenue projections, as you know, those are based on weather, if we're going to have a good day or not. We can kind of look at our typical line item for a pool, divide it by the number of days, and that's, you know, per average per day is what we kind of look at, and that's what I used in calculating that. I didn't include the reduction in expenses that we will have with staff time, pool part-time staff time, I should say, during the course of the event. Now, I didn't put in the expected overtime that Missy and I will incur, and maybe some of our, you know, park staff just kind of being on call 24/7 to support this event. So I think maybe somewhere those actual cost of predicted is going to be somewhere between that 10 and 13, and so I would be comfortable in supporting the recommendation from the Park and Rec Board.
Any questions?
And
Okay.
Bill still needs to review and
Right.
edit for the second reading.
And at finance, we approved it with the recommendation that the agreement be amended to expressly require that they allow the promotional
Yeah.
opportunity.
Sure. Anything else? All right, thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Next item F, consideration of ordinance 1-18-694, amending chapters of the Code of Ordinances and fees, fines, and penalties schedule put forth by the city administrator. This is April's famous cleanup ordinance.
That long ass.
Yes.
And I won't go into too much detail unless you want me to, but essentially it cleans up some garbled language here and there, gets rid of a few redundancies we've found. There were a few code references that were inadvertently left out. And as a separate part, it makes changes to the fee schedule. Again, in the 28-page document, we just simply missed a few things or thought they should be adjusted. The only thing that would be, I don't even want to say so much a bit of a policy consideration, is as promised, this includes a 1/2 hour earlier start time for city council. That's included in this ordinance because literally it's changing one number to the ordinance, so it was a pretty simple thing. But that would be the only thing I would say that, you know, would be a change that you would feel.
Any questions? Andrew?
Quick question, sorry to bring this one up. So when we passed the leashed dogs in parks amendment ordinance, and Jake can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we also, as a Parks Board, recommended increasing that fine. Not that we fully enforce it at all times, but I know it was a discussion amongst Parks Board that if we're allowing dogs in parks and they don't clean up the waste, that we want to make them pay, essentially, and increase that fine. And I believe $100 was
Do you know
kind
what
of the
chapter
agreed
that would
fine.
be, Jake?
I believe it was 100, but I don't know if we incorporated that into the first round of fee review, because I think we set all of them, buildings, set all park violations at one rate or no?
That's
I
what I'm
don't
looking for.
think so,
No.
because
No.
I know we also talked about increasing not allowing vehicle access for neighbors in
Right.
parks.
Yeah.
And that was also talked about to increase that fee.
It was 100, yeah.
So I don't know if we just add that to this, if that's,
Are we
What we're
not sure if
doing.
it's in here? or-
That's what I'm looking for, but it's
I-
28 pages, so I'm
Yeah, I
scrolling.
don't
Do you know
think
what
We're gonna
chapter
vote on
that
this
would
next
be?
time, so
Yeah.
we could-
no, this is something to look at later,
Yeah.
but I just
Okay.
wanted to bring it up now.
Okay, anything else? All right, one final item G, consideration of resolution 1-18-2235, supporting passage of Assembly Bill 118, increasing legal protections for burial sites, put forth by the Landmarks Commission. And Doug, will you speak to this?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts of this I want to just briefly talk about. AB 118 is a bill pending before the legislature. It's passed the Assembly with bipartisan support. It was referred to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. They've had a hearing about 2 weeks ago, and as far as I know, nothing else has happened. So this is basically encouraging passage of that bill, which would increase the improve the protections for ancient burial sites, of which we have a number located within the city. It would do specifically increase the barrier or the protected area around the burial site from 5 feet now under current law to 10 feet, and that would only apply prospectively, and requires the owner of a property with an ancient burial site on their property to disclose its presence to any prospective buyers. This actually, I learned about this as a result of, and I don't know if everybody there was an email sent out this afternoon from Sonia with some additional materials that weren't in the packet, but in particular there were some photos that I had taken. This whole issue came to my attention as a result of what appears to be some damage to the Rindall Mound on sort of North Monona Drive, 4007, 4009 Monona Drive, when a new sidewalk was put in extending from the street next to the garage all the way back to the building. I think it's condos or apartments at the back. I was alerted to this by Dorothy Haynes, who is a local historian, but wrote the book Monona in the Making. And I went over, took some pictures, sent those to the Wisconsin Historical Society, who has jurisdiction under state law to enforce and protect the mounds. This was actually, the Rindall Mound was the very first mound cataloged in the state. It's obvious, if you look at the pictures, it's pretty clear that at least the surface was disturbed during the construction. So as a result of that, there's been sort of this informal group of us, about half dozen or so, have gotten together, and one of the members of that, Tom Solberg, was aware of this AB 118, which sort of dovetailed with our concerns. As the first catalog mound in the state, this mound actually has a 0 foot area, an additional protected area around it, because that was the law at the time it was cataloged. That mound is about 1,000 years old, and it actually aligns with the setting sun over Lake Monona I believe it's at the equinoxes. Was part of a larger group of burial mounds. This is the only one left out of that group. So I think it's something Landmarks Commission is going to be following what happens with that mound, but we wanted to sort of put forth, and they were very strong in their support of passage of supporting this the legislation as well. So.
Did you want to vote on this tonight?
Yeah. Oh,
Or is
yeah.
that-
I would move to suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion?
move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Jennifer?
Homeowners have, oh, sorry.
I haven't had a chance to read the bill, but do you know if the bill calls out whether there's confirmed remains in the mounds, or if it's just
I think
designated
it's
mounds?
for mounds that are cataloged, and I don't believe they necessarily have to know for sure whether there are remains in the mound. I mean, I think when they were cataloged back in the 80s, I'm not sure the technology existed to determine it without opening up the mound, which obviously you're not gonna do.
Because the reason I ask is there was a bill in the legislature, I think it was part of the budget, the last biennium, wanting to force property owners to prove that there were not remains in the mound in order to be able to, disturb them, essentially. This had to do with a quarry company that was wanting to access.
This bill actually, as I understand it, grew out of that controversy. There was an effort to, I think they wanted to remove the mound to get at the gravel that was beneath it. And that it was referred to a joint committee at the Legislative Council, and actually there was strongly supported by Speaker Voss, and was passed out of that committee with bipartisan support, and then went to the Assembly, as I said, and it passed. So it sort of started out as a negative, and this is what the end result of the process was. So we'll see what the Senate does with it.
Anyone else? Alder Moore, did you want to say something?
No, I just was a little confused, since this is one of the first catalog mounds. I'm assuming that the homeowner was well aware of its presence.
Should be. It's on the. My understanding is it's on the deed. It's a recorded deed restriction on the deed.
But there's nothing that prevents the homeowner from obviously disturbing it at this point without the passage of this new.
No, right now they're not supposed to. They require anybody that's going to do any work that would potentially disturb a mound or ancient burial site is required to get a permit from the Historical Society. They did not do that.
So is there any kind of penalty for that?
There is, I believe. I'm not sure what it is. I think the folks in the Historical Society are planning on coming out this week to actually look at it.
It's unfortunate it just snowed, but.
Yeah. I think, yeah, so, I mean, there's not a whole lot. I don't think that there would, at this point, the damage has been done.
Right.
And you can't really undo, if you try to undo it, you probably make it worse. But, I think it's something that, it's, should be highlighted so that other people just so that the general community is aware that they're here, and but also that property owners who have them should be more aware of them.
Well, it's not that I'm, wanting to gouge somebody, but it just seems like if there is no consequence for doing it, then there's really no point in having a law. I mean, even, because people will just do what they want to do anyway.
Right. So I think there is, I'm sure there's a penalty for doing it without a permit. Exactly what I can't speak for the
Hopefully
Historical
that's something to
Society.
determine when they come out this week.
Right. What action to take. The other aspect is you do get, or you're eligible for a property tax credit or exemption of that part of your property that's taken up by the mound. And I don't know if these people have taken advantage of that or not. I would assume that if you damage the mound, it at least would seem logical that you shouldn't be eligible for that tax exemption, at least, for that year, if not thereafter, depending on the damage. But
So anybody else?
I
Andrew?
just want to comment that I'm supportive of it. I mean, so a lot of the times with landmark type issues, one of the questions you get, what rights do the property owners get as having private property for various reasons? And it looks like this bill adds a new procedure for landowners to have a say in the process throughout the whole thing, but also ultimately to contest it in front of, the state historical committee or some sort of process. So,
Right.
I'm supportive.
True.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we are on to reports of committees, commission, boards, et cetera. Alder Moore.
Nothing to report.
Alder Kitzler.
A lot in the library, January 27th. Get your tickets now.
I have 2 tickets in
it's-
my purse if anyone
yes.
wants them.
I got mine today.
It's a fun event, so you can get your tickets here. You can get your tickets from a lot of people. So
Anything
please come.
else? Alder Wood?
Well, that's all I was gonna say too, is I bought mine today, so
Well, very good.
I can see our city attorney is one of the sponsors, I believe.
He is. You
As
said no
is-
report, Jen?
Just get them to sponsor the All-City.
No report. City clerk?
No report, Mayor.
Andrews? Administrator Little. I did present the appointment process to the staff today, and they had a couple of suggestions that I'll be, taking into account, making a few little changes, but for the most part, everybody is fine with it, and so be looking for your rosters of your committees to be sent to you. Leah will be doing that within the next couple of weeks, and then there's a process to follow for anybody whose term is running out this spring. So we'd appreciate getting answers for people who would like to be reappointed or whatever else you decide on by mid-March, if you could. Let's see, we have 2 appointments. Is there a motion to approve the appointments? Jean Bindle for election inspector, January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2019, and Sarah Smith to the Sustainability Committee, someone who Nancy selected using our process,
Move to approve.
effective immediately through May
Sorry.
2019.
Sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned.